God, we're not born with a certificate that says you have now been born and we promise you'll have a wonderful life. It doesn't work that way, man. You got to fight for success. You got to fight for what you want to do. You got to fight to be a musician. You got to fight to keep going. But a lot of these guys just get depression. It's genetic and they commit suicide. It broke my heart when Chris did that. And Lane and Alice in Chains and all those other bands. I just didn't get it.
Yeah.
I have depression. I'm bipolar. I'm up, I'm down. Some days I want to write a rock song, up tempo, kicking ass, just rocking. That's the mood I'm in. Then the next day, I'm feeling mopey, and I might write a song like Heaven Sent. It just depends on whatever the universe gives me. But I would never kill myself. I've got children and I've got my family, and I just don't relate to that. But, that's another story.
Battle Line podcast. By the way, if you're watching on video, if you're watching on YouTube, I know most of you guys tend to watch or listen on the audio platforms. You might be wondering why I'm holding this Rode mic as I do the reads. So I have another Rode mic here that I conduct the interviews on, and then when I have to use the camera, for some reason, that records in stereo only on one channel, and then this records in mono. But I'm holding this mic because at my other job for Nidus, where I work with Adam Cowan, while we were setting up this microphone, which I sometimes bring to his house in Long Beach, I broke the tripod. So I'm gonna have to get a new tripod for this microphone. I'll probably call Rode, and they're actually really good. They're not a sponsor of this show or anything, but they tend to like be good with replacing stuff because I've had issues like that before. But I like whether it's that microphone, the condenser microphone, or just this USB. It's a great microphone. Like I love the sound. I don't mess with any of that Blue Yeti stuff. I'm not a fan of that microphone at all. So yeah, I feel like I should be performing or something with this. There's actually a very interesting part of the interview that didn't get recorded because Don's connection throughout the interview was great, but then it stopped because he said there was like a storm there where he's at in New Mexico, and he was saying there was lightning and everything. So I started singing with him when we reconnected. I was like, "When the lightning strikes again," and he was singing it with me, and I'm like, dude, how cool is that? I got to sing "When the Lightning Strikes Again" with Don Dokken. This is a great interview. We cover a lot of ground, not just the new album, which we do speak about, but we also speak about a lot of stuff in the history of Don Dokken, the history of the Sunset Strip. We get into a little bit of politics because Don wanted to voice his opinion on some things going on. So we're all over the map. I think you guys are really going to enjoy this, whether you're clicking on this because you're a fan of Dokken or you're just a regular listener of Battle Line Podcast. Make sure to hit subscribe. But before we get into this, with over 700 five-star customer reviews, Ned's Mellow Magnesium is an instant hit. And I also want to speak about Ned's Brain Blend, which I absolutely love. And there's guys who are coming back with traumatic brain injury. We have a lot of veterans who have served, who listen to the podcast, and they wanted to get out there. That this is actually helping guys in terms of that with a natural supplement that's not only CBD but also is a nootropic. I've taken it many times, and for me, CBD is great for sleep. I get a great night's sleep every time I take it, but then I'm also taking a nootropic, so I would highly recommend Ned's Brain Blend. Check it out on the website, but as well as Ned's Mellow Magnesium. You're going to get the best deal through all their products, though, when you do it through us at helloned.com/battleline or add the code battleline at checkout. That's HELLONED.com/battleline. HelloNed.com/battleline. Also, this show is sponsored by Bird Dogs, which I just love saying. Bird Dogs make you look good. Bird Dogs stretch khaki shorts are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. They fit way better than regular shorts that are made of a stiff, restricting cotton. They fixed this issue by inventing cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki but stretches so you get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement. They're the best, guys. Check it out. Go to battlelinepodcast.com/birddogs. You'll get a free Yeti-style tumbler with your order. That's battlelinepodcast.com/birddogs for a free Yeti-style tumbler. You won't want to take your bird dogs off, we promise you. That's battlelinepodcast.com/birddogs. With that, let's get right into this interview with the legend, Don Dokken.
From Kansas City to New York City, from planet Earth to extraterrestrial life in space, a podcast with no equal, engaged in unconventional warfare through your speakers and headphones. This is a show about embracing the suck, conquering your demons, and finding God in the face of adversity. Chris Tonto Peranto.
Switch is on. Motherfucker, I'm gonna shoot you in the face.
Ian Scotto.
You know, Ian and I have been dating for a long time.
You are now tuned into the Battle Line Podcast.
The Switch is on, Battle Line Podcast. It is an absolute honor to have Don Dokken on, from Dokken, of course. Heaven Comes Down, October 27th, the new release. I will get into it with you, but I've been a Dokken fan for so many years, and I am absolutely diehard. So it's
thank
awesome
you.
to have you on, Don.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, before I get into like my line of questioning and the new album, I'll tell you this: I'm 37, so my introduction to Dokken was definitely years later, and it was, of course, the Dream Warriors video, like so many other people. It was unlike anything I'd seen at the time. George Lynch's amazing guitar solo, the video, of course, very of the time, but also just very different from anything else out there as well, even for fans of the 80s. And I did get to see, you know, people always label, is this really gonna be the last show of something? I did get to see the last ever Dokken show of the original lineup when you guys played South Dakota. And I'm in New York. I flew to South Dakota just to see that at
Cool.
Badlands Pawn Shop, and it was incredible.
Oh yeah, the Badlands. I forgot about that gig. That
Yeah,
was
because it was the Japan tour, and that was the only
Atlanta.
US show.
Yeah, that was our only US show, and it was kind of weird. I know the guy that opened up Badlands Pawn, and he actually had built a golf course, and he had a shooting range, and you know, he's a millionaire, and he was from that town, and he opened up that venue with a cool stage, and you know, we filmed it and did everything, and then apparently something happened in Dakota where the tax structure changed, and he was getting nailed with taxes, and it all went belly up. The golf course, the venue. It was a cool venue. We had some hot rods on the floor, but that was Chuck something. I can't remember his name. And so, yeah, that was our last show. Very, very last show we did as far as the original lineup.
For the US, right? Because you had the Japan shows out.
US. We did the Japan reunion tour years later as kind of a test, you know, with the original lineup to see if we could get along and if everything went right and if there's the magic was still there. And you know, we did 4 shows sold out in Tokyo and in Yokohama, but honestly the magic wasn't there. So you know, I said, okay, we did it, and I didn't want to. They wanted to continue on with a US reunion tour, and I said no.
I'm interested in why you feel the magic wasn't there, because you're still regularly doing stuff with George Lynch. We know Mick Brown is no longer playing drums, so that's why that truly is the last time I'll get to see you guys. So, I mean, why wasn't the magic there?
People get older, people change, people get married, have kids, whatever. I mean, just it wasn't there. You know, not like the band I have now, which John Levin, who's been in the band 20 years, longer than George ever was.
Yeah.
And, you know, George's guitar style, in my opinion, has changed. I think he's searching for something new because he plays eccentrically when he plays with this couple songs after each show. You know, he comes on stage for a couple songs and jams. A couple times he actually had his Lynch Mob, he reformed them and they warmed up for us. So it was Lynch Mob, then we'd play, then he'd come on stage and play a couple of songs. But, the magic's not there. Hey, the magic wasn't there in 88 after Monsters of Rock. That's why we broke up. There's a lot of things. It's an old story of a lot of bands that break up. Drugs, alcohol, cocaine abuse, egos. It was over, and
But I suppose you guys don't hate each other, being that you're still sharing the stage at times, you and George.
no, we're too old for all that crap.
Got you. So you're able to still work with him in some capacity, I guess, but just not to do a full tour.
Yeah, we've talked and we shoot the shit. I mean, I moved out of LA after my whole life. I live in New Mexico now in Santa Fe. He bought a house in Taos, New Mexico. So that we have in common. And he'll send me pictures of him building a barn. He's got a cow and and I've got my estate, and with thousands of trees I have to look after. And so we text once in a while about what's going on in his life, my life in New Mexico, because it's very different. I live very isolated. So does he. He bought himself a hacienda outside of Taos, very private. We're both kind of like that. We're both kind of reclusive. And so we talk, but, but we're not going to get back together. I mean, Mick, when Mick left the band, I remember the day he left. We were still on tour. We had 2 shows to go, and he just said, I can't do it anymore. I mean, he literally couldn't get out of the airplane seat. I had to put my hand out and pull him out of the seat, because I've said for decades, the person that has the hardest job in any rock band is the drummer.
For sure.
And especially with the way Mick played. Your knees wear out, your feet, your elbows, you tear your rotator cuffs. And I used to say to Mick, don't hit so hard, man. Just play quiet, softer. And he goes, I can't. I have to hit as hard as I can, or I can't keep my time. So it's like being a quarterback. You have a short life expectancy as a quarterback. And being a drummer is very, very hard. You look at Neil Peart in Rush. He said, I can't play anymore 100%. So he left the band, because he felt he couldn't put out 100%. And Mick said, I can play 100% every night, but it's painful. He had really bad, arthritis. And like he said, he's been playing since he's 10 years old. You play drums for 50 years, it's going to take a toll on your body. So he left, he retired, he's happy, and he rides his Harley and he's just living his life,
Yeah, and I know for you getting on stage, I mean, this is all well documented, has been painful for you as well, and yet you're still on the road and still doing it.
Yeah, I thought it was over. I mean, after I had my surgery, everybody kept saying, give it a year, give it a year, give it a year, you get your arm back. It's been 3 years, and you see this hand's fine. You look at this hand, it's fucked. See,
Yeah.
I can barely move my fingers. So when that happened, I went, well, now I'm in trouble. I want to do a new record. We were halfway done, but I couldn't play guitar anymore. I couldn't play piano, bass, drums anymore. I can't play. And my whole arm's, paralyzed. So I waited 2 years, it didn't come back, and it's not going to come back. But we got through it. And luckily we did a great record,
Absolutely. I mean, I want to get into it because the 2 songs released so far, I think, are incredible. And we will get into it, but I'd actually like to start from earlier on, because I'm looking at the gold and platinum records behind you. You were speaking about living in LA for all those years, and anyone who knows Dokken's history, you were on the scene in LA before there really was a scene of what people call the 80s hair metal or glam metal genre, before bands like Motley Crue on my shirt, before any of that. And you guys were also a band who actually lived there. You didn't move to LA because there wasn't that scene at the time. You guys kicked it off, and I, in my opinion, don't get the respect when people think of those bands that started a whole scene in LA.
Yeah, most of those bands came from like Poison. I think they came from Ohio and
Pennsylvania, I think.
we were playing the Whiskey, the Starwood in 77 with Van Halen. And it was great in LA because there wasn't just the Whiskey or the Starwood or the Troubadour or Gazzarri's. There were like 15 clubs within like a 45-minute drive. And you could actually play every weekend, bouncing around from San Diego to Orange County to the Valley, and I could actually almost pay my rent. So, but Van Halen, we did a lot of shows with them at the Whiskey and other clubs. And then they're the first one to really get the record deal. And then that first album was so brilliant. I mean, it was a genius. It just took off. And then every band in the Midwest and East Coast said, we're going to LA, we're going to get a record deal. But you know what? It didn't happen, because the new wave scene hit right after Van Halen made it. And after played the S Festival, all the new wave bands were coming to LA. And that's why I went to Germany in '79. I said, screw this. I'm a hard rock guy. I'm not changing, So I went to Germany in '79, did a tour. 1981, did a tour, came back, still new wave. And then, luckily, Quiet Riot got their record deal. And I'd say to their credit, they were the first band ever, hard rock band, to go to #1 in the Billboard charts. They knocked Michael Jackson out of #1. It was like Quiet Riot, Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson on Thriller had been in #1 for like 4 months, and then Quiet Riot knocked him out, So, but yeah, a lot of bands came, and it was kind of weird, I mean, these bands were showing up. We have to have bigger hair and more Aquanet and more glam, and we just weren't like that, We were a hard rock band. So it took us a couple of years, and we finally got a record deal.
What was it like observing that though, when you guys got signed and then Motley Crue gets signed, and as you said, the bands like Poison and Rat and I mean, because that was like a 10-year run of that LA scene just dominating rock.
Yep, it was. I remember we got signed to Elektra probably within 6 months of Motley almost also getting signed. So you had Motley Crue and Dokken on Elektra. Motley put out an EP, Too Fast for Love. Rat had put out an EP, 4 or 5 songs, and they finally got a record deal on Atlantic. And then Rat came out with their video Round and Around. It took off, and within 6 months they were playing arenas, and Quiet Riot was playing arenas, but we weren't. We were mostly just touring a lot. But I told my manager, I said, we're becoming like everybody's favorite support band. We play with Priest, AC/DC, you name it. We play with everybody, but always not headlining, just supporting. And we had that slow climb between Tooth and Nail, Iron Lock and Key, Back the Attack. And by '88, when we were playing stadiums with Van Halen, Scorpions, Metallica, Kingdom Come, we finally had gotten to that point where we could go out and headline a world tour. We had that many fans. But it was unfortunate that we were right, as I say, our toes were hanging off the cliff of superstardom, and we just couldn't come to terms with the band staying together because of the drugs and stuff, and I never got into that scene, the cocaine scene. So it's hard when you got 3 guys in the back of the bus coked up for days, and I'm not. So it was tough,
I remember
So
in an interview, George Lynch saying in the Dream Warriors video, he was so high that that wall that he breaks through was supposed to be made so that a baby could break through that wall, and he had to step over it because he was so weak at the time, which is like, it's crazy to hear the abuse that went on.
well, and also that was the prop master's fault. It was supposed to be a breakaway wall, with like balsa wood. The wood was supposed to be balsa wood in the drywall, and he should just be able to push right through it. But somebody screwed up and had real 2x4s on the wall, so he rammed it. You don't have to take, because we didn't do it, and he tried to run through it, and he couldn't. And he's like, shit. And the guy's like, yeah, you just got to run faster. And you see, he had to break through, and he got stuck, and he got through, and he got Patricia Arquette standing there. But that was mostly the prop masters. They screwed up and didn't make a breakaway wall, but he got through it. Like he said, he was pretty coked up. He admits it, and so was Jeff, and so was Mick. And it was a hard shoot, because every time we take a break on a take, everybody's running off to do a line of coke, and I was like, for me, it was frustrating.
Yeah, and I know it's like the height of debauchery because you hear the stories about them doing coke off the Robert Englund, Freddy Krueger glove and stuff like that. But I always
Yeah.
think like the coke, the roided up George Lynch of the '90s would probably be able to break through that wall no problem.
Oh yeah. I mean, boy, the '90s. Holy shit. I mean, I didn't recognize George. I mean, he looked like Arnold Schwarzenegger. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, he was
he
massive.
was ripped. He was so buffed, and I was like, dude, what are you doing? But the steroid thing, and he used to be a skinny guy. And during the '80s, he was skinny, and then I didn't see him for a couple years. Then I saw him again when we got back together on the Dysfunctional album. He came in at the last minute. The album was done. I wrote it by myself. I built a recording studio, and I was recording my second solo album. And then Jeff came back and Mick came back because they lost all their money, to be really honest with you, if they own it. They bought mansions, and I just had a little 2-bedroom, 1-bath house at the beach. I didn't need a mansion. I was single and no kids, wasn't married. So they all wanted to come back in the band. And then George came back at the very last second. I mean, he actually had nothing to do with Dysfunctional. He played one solo on Two Out of Fly. And when he walked in the studio, I was like, holy crap, he looks like Killer King, that Alice Cooper had, remember? He was
Yeah,
all,
yeah, yeah, absolutely. The
and
thing that's were we saying sorry?
no, I was just saying when he walked in, I hadn't seen him in a couple of years. I was like, man, you're ripped.
He was huge, yeah. The thing that
Humongous.
always stood out to me about Dokken when you talk about the scene that was there and how you guys were kind of different is quite honestly, the lyrics were way more versatile. The songs were sometimes way more complex. And I mean, you had songs like Kiss of Death about the AIDS epidemic or
Yep.
Will the Sun Rise about war going on. And you were not the band who was just about the partying and the fire. You may have been a part of that scene because it was all out of LA at that same time, but I definitely think that there's something in the music and the lyrics that always separated Dokken from all the other bands that was just all about fun party lifestyle and their lyrics 24/7.
Yeah. I mean, if I look back at my 13 album history, which is not as much as a lot of bands put out, because I was the main lyricist, I never wrote a song called Girls, Girls, Girls or Unskinny Bop Bop, or it just wasn't my writing skill. I'm not knocking them. The Girls, Girls, Girls Motley Crue video was a killer song. And Unskinny Bop Bop, I have no idea what that means.
I don't think any of
Yeah,
us do.
you'd have to ask Brett that. But it wasn't my writing style. I wrote, like you said, I wrote songs like Kiss of Death about AIDS, and Will the Sunrise was about the end of the world, and the apocalypse is coming, and what's going to happen when we wake up tomorrow. And those are the things that I wrote about. And I wrote about love found and love lost, but I just wasn't into those pop choruses. It wasn't Doc, and we got stigmatized because we came from the '80s and we had long hair. And they're like, oh yeah, Doc and hair metal band. I'm like, I hated that term. We're not a hair metal band. We tour with AC/DC, Judas Priest, all the heavy, heavy bands. You would never see a band like Poison opening up for AC/DC. You would never see a band like Motley Crue or Poison opening up for Judas Priest. These are the bands we opened up for because we had that heavy side to us. But the fans only saw what they saw on MTV. In My Dreams, It's Not Love, Just Got Lucky, Alone Again. The commercial songs were on MTV. So I think that kind of put us in that category that we were a hair band. But any hardcore Dokken fan knows we were kind of schizophrenic. We had our commercial hits, and then we had our heavy, more intelligent, dark lyrics about life and apocalyptic stuff and AIDS. And I don't think any of those bands wrote songs about that.
I would agree. And then of the bands you listed, I mean, you also got to tour with Metallica pre-Black Album or do shows with them, I should say, before they were a household name.
Yeah, that was a tough tour because they hadn't done the Black Album yet. I mean, Metallica's now the biggest band in the world.
Absolutely. I just saw them at Giant Stadium, and I've never seen a crowd bigger in my entire life.
No, it's huge. I mean, they play the Antarctic. They can play anywhere they want. I saw the video, they played the Antarctic. I was like, holy shit, out in an ice floe. And that was kind of maybe the reason we broke up, because of Metallica. Because when we played the stadium tour, Metallica came on stage every day with this attitude like, do or die. I mean, they just gave it 100%, 110%. They were kicking ass. They were just coming out with Injustice for All, which was not my favorite Metallica album. And, they hadn't done the Black Album yet. This now took them into superstardom. And I would talk to the band and I say, look at Metallica. And they're opening for us. And we have the same manager. And I say, well, Cliff, I know they're opening up and they're only making half the money as us, but could you put them on after us? Because when Metallica went on and they closed the show with whatever it was, Kill 'Em All or something like that, we're coming on stage doing In My Dreams. We look like the Monkees practically, because we're just a straight ahead rock and roll band. But I respected Metallica so much, because we'd be in Texas and it'd be like 105 degrees and they'd go on at like 3 o'clock and it's just sweltering hot. But they went on every day. Metallica had this mindset that if this is our last show, we die, so be it. They gave it 110%. And we've been on the road for a year and a half. And I think we just kind of got full of ourselves, I mean, we had toured with Aerosmith and all these other bands, and we weren't playing well, in my opinion, because the drugs. When you're on stage in front of 100,000 people, and I'm trying to, front the band, and you got all these cameras on you and big screens, and the camera would go to George during a solo, and I'd look over and there's no George on stage. Where's George? I hear him playing, but he was on stage because he was standing behind his Marshall amplifiers doing coke. And, I begged and pleaded and said, is there any way you guys can't do drugs for 90 minutes? And basically they said no. They were doing coke on stage. And it was really, for me, depressing. I started the band's called Dokken, and everybody was doing coke on stage. And I was like, Jesus Christ. And that's when the band unraveled.
And that actually makes me wonder, because you put out the Don Dokken solo album following all of that. When did you decide, hey, this is my band that I created, I'm going to carry the torch, I'm going to use the name Dokken?
Well, after we broke up, George got a job, a record deal with Elektra's Lynch Mob, and they wanted to keep me as Dokken. And I thought this might be a conflict of interest to have Dokken and Lynch Mob in the same label. Somebody's going to take a hit on the promotion. So I left and went to Geffen. And I hate it when people say, oh, and you did your solo album. It wasn't a solo album. It was just going to be another Dokken album. But the band sued
and it's
me.
a great album, I should throw out there. Great album.
Come on, man. Up from the Ashes, one of the best albums I ever did. I'm so proud of that album.
I love it.
And it was kind of like a superstar group. Mickey D on drums, who had just left King Diamond and joined me. And then you had Peter Baltz from Accept. You had John Norum from Europe. I discovered this kid, 18 years old, Billy White. We were a super group. But I go to Geffen, and all of a sudden I get a lawsuit, and the three of them were suing me to take my name away. And I said, well, you can't take my name away. Sue my father or my great grandfather or my great great.
Which just happens to be a great band name.
That rhymes with rockin'. But I wasn't really worried about it. It was a very expensive, long, protracted lawsuit. But I thought, you guys can take my name. It's my name. You can't take it away. But when we got to court, this 80-year-old senile judge goes, well, what's the difference between Don Dokken and Dokken? I said, there's a big difference. If I put my surname on it, people will think it's a solo album. That's what everybody calls it. No, it's just another Dokken album. And if I would have just called it Dokken, it would have sold 4 times more. But the judge, what they call, he split the baby, because Jeff, George, and Mick wanted to go on as Dokken. And I said, I will fight you to the ends of the earth for you guys going on as Dokken without me. And at the end of the day, the judge said, you guys can't use the name Dokken. Don can't use the name Dokken, but I can't legally keep Don from making records as Don Dokken. And that's what happened. So it took 3 years. And then finally, after they all went broke from snorting all their money up their nose, they came back to me. And I said, you want me back in the band? Just sign this piece of paper that you have no rights to name Dokken. I own the name, and sign this piece of paper. Otherwise, you're not coming back to the band. And they all did. They all signed off. So that's when I got the name back.
That actually sounds similar to the Guns N' Roses story, right? With Axl owning the name Guns N' Roses.
Same thing. And when they came back in the band, then I finally gotten a little older and a little wiser. I immediately called a lawyer and said, I need to trademark my name, Dokken. I need to patent it. I need to patent and trademark the name, the logo Dokken. I just never thought I needed to do all that bullshit with lawyers. I never in my wildest dreams thought the three of them would sue me for my own name and try to take it away from me. And when I got to court, I was like 98% sure that I would win, but I didn't. So I put out the album on Geffen Don Dokken. And that hurt it. It did, 400, 500,000, but the album before had done $1.5 million. But I said, Your Honor, if I have to call it Don Dokken, they're going to think it's a solo album. And I made the point, like, you look at icons like Mick Jagger, he put out solo albums. They didn't sell shit compared to the Stones. And then Mick thought, I'll get David Bowie. We'll do a collaboration. It'll be two superstars, Mick Jagger and David Bowie, and they'll sell millions. And they got a lot of money for that record. And then they put out that single, Dancing on the Streets. Of all the songs you're going to do, that's the worst song you could ever pick. It was a lame video, a lame record, and it didn't sell shit. Even with David Bowie's name on it, and they're walking down the street dancing. Come on, man. They could have wrote a brand new song. Or of all the songs they're going to redo, you don't do Dancing in the Streets by the Shirelles. It's ridiculous. So I knew, and David Geffen knew, he said, you got to fight for your name, Don, get your name back. But if we have to put out Don Dokken, it's going to hurt your record sales. And it did. So, but finally, a couple of years later, as the rest of the members were married and getting divorced and losing their houses and alimony, and they pissed all their money away on Ferraris, they all wanted to come back. And I said, okay, but you got to sign this piece of paper that says, I own Dokken. I'm going to trademark it, and it's going to be Dokken. You never try to take my name away again. And that's what happened.
It's funny that I mentioned the parallel to Guns N' Roses, because it sounds like the exact same thing of them reuniting. Axl still owns the name, Slash got divorced. Suddenly they reunite. So
Yep.
yeah, I understand with that. Hey guys, hope you're enjoying this interview with Don Dokken. We covered so much ground here. Before we continue, Fort Scott Munitions is a manufacturer of multi-federal patented solid copper and brass CNC spun ammunition that is designed to tumble upon impact in soft tissue, leaving devastating wound channels for faster bleed out and quicker incapacitation. This ammunition was originally developed to innovate and improve on the standard of military-grade ammunition design. It was found that not only did the TUI ammunition outperform competitors in the self-defense industry, but it quickly became apparent that it would be a top contender for hunters alike. With the ammunition being CNC spun, the tolerances are some of the tightest on the market, ensuring that you receive the same results with each pull of the trigger. Fort Scott Munitions is available throughout privately owned businesses in all 50 states, or you can just go to the website for the best deal through us here at Battleline Podcast. That's FSM.com. Use the exclusive promo code Battleline for 15% off your order. FSM.com, promo code Battleline for 15% off. Fort Scott Munitions is a proud supporter of Chris Peranto, Battleline Tactical, and the Battleline Podcast. A lot more ground covered with Don Dokken, so let's get right back to that interview with the Dokken frontman, legend Don Dokken. So I know that you're here, of course, to promote the new album, and I do want to talk about it. And I will say, when I heard the first single, I wasn't sure what to expect because it's been quite a few years since Broken Bones came out. And I
Yep.
know at the time you were saying Broken Bones may be the last Dokken album. But I
Yep.
have to say, I was pleasantly surprised and impressed by what you're doing with the new album. And it actually has a very unique sound to it. I don't think you're trying to sound like classic Dokken. This is what Dokken sounds like in 2023 with the current lineup. And man, it's just
Correct.
extremely catchy, and a lot of work was put into those videos, I can tell.
Oh yeah. I mean, everybody says, oh, I had so many offers for years after we did many albums after Despunct. We did like Long Way Home and Shadow Life with George, and he left again. Then I did Lightning Strikes Again with John and Hell to Pay. And, we've done 6 albums since back in the day. But all the labels that would approach me would say to me, we want to give you a record deal, but we want your songs to sound like Tooth and Nail meets Back the Attack. And I said, well, then I'm not interested. I can't go back 30 years. I'm older. I mean, that was literally in their offer that I had to sound like Tooth and Nail meets Back the Attack or Lock and Key. I said, guys, I was in my 30s, wherever my spirit and my soul and my writing was, the world's moved on and I have different inspiration and everything has happened. I could write Tooth and Nail in 1 week and just regurgitate those same songs. I said, but I can't. I have to write whatever I'm inspired for. And I've told many interviewers, I said, I don't just sit down and write a song. I wait for the universe to inspire me. And it might happen at 2 in the morning, 5 in the morning, 6 in the afternoon. And I'd run to my recording studio and I'd put down a demo and I'd write whatever was in my head. I mean, I used to keep those micro cassette recorders. I had one on the toilet, in the living room, in my studio, in the bedroom. I don't just sit down and write a song and go, okay, we're gonna write, unskinny bop bop blows me away. I'm assuming that Poison, I'm not knocking Poison,
No,
God
I
bless,
know. Yeah.
but I'm assuming they're talking about strippers or something like that. I don't know. I have to ask Brett that or Cece. But I said, look, I'm just gonna write whatever comes into my soul, into my head. I can't tell you I'm going to write what I did 20 years ago because I'm not in that same headspace. And they would go, oh, I said, then never mind. I just go, never mind, until I found a record company and said, just write what you want, whatever. And I think this album, you haven't heard the whole album apparently.
No, not yet.
It's
It's not
stuff
out
like
yet.
a lot of the journalists have the whole record, mostly the
Ah,
Europeans.
they got to hook
But
me up, man, because I'm
yeah,
hungry to hear it. I pre-ordered it on Amazon. I got the CD coming in the mail.
they all have the record, and they were like, "Oh my God, this album is classic Dokken." Man, you've only heard
Two
"Fugitive" and
songs. Yeah.
Gypsy, and I'm like, "No, I'm just gonna write what I write." And if it comes out grunge or techno or prog, whatever happens, it happens. And I just wrote what I wanted to write, and it came out. Every band, when you interview somebody, they say it's our greatest record,
Of
the
course.
best record we've ever done. It's the most amazing. It's our best record. I'm not saying that, but when we were all done, and Kevin Shirley, who's like a world famous engineer, lives in Australia. We had to mail the stuff to Australia, and he mixed it. And the first couple tracks he mixed, I was very disappointed with. And I was like, Kevin, I'm not digging these mixes. He goes, well, I thought you wanted that classic 80s Dokken sound. I said, dude, that ship is sailed, man. I want a punchy, aggressive, in your face album. And he had just finished Iron Maiden's album. And that's why I hired him. I said, I want it to sound like Iron Maiden's record, you know, big, heavy, bottom end, punchy, not slick, lots of reverb, like Def Leppard's, Pyromania, which is a brilliant album, but it was very slick. And it took him 4 years to record it.
Yeah.
And I said, Kevin, just make it loud, in your face. Forget about whatever we did in the 80s. So Kevin said, okay, I'm switching gears. So we'd be on the phone back and forth because he's in Australia. I'm in Mexico, and he's emailing me mixes like every 20 minutes. I had my phone next to my bed. I sent you a new mix. I'd have to get up, put my headphones on, and I go, email him back and go, a little more snare, a little less reverb, a little more bass, a little more cymbals. Then I go back to bed. 20 minutes later, he emailed me, okay, sent you another mix. It was a nightmare. I mean, to mix a record for some guy in Australia. But he's Kevin Shirley. He's the top guy in the world. And I was very grateful that he wanted to mix our record. And he said to me when I called him, he said, I always want to mix a Dokken record. So the album came out punchy, amazing. It's a perfect mix. Every song, even he said, dude, I can't find any songs on this record that I would call a B song. They're all A songs. Every song on your record is an A song. I haven't heard one song on this record that's kind of a what we call filler. And from buying records from a lot of bands, I can name them, but I'm not going to because I don't want to get thrown under the bus by blabbermouth. A lot of bands write the hit and the video and the second song, and the rest of the songs are like, it's all right. It's just filler. It seems like a lot of the bands would give up. They'd write their hits and maybe a second single, and the rest was all pablum, just pablum. And I told the guys when COVID hit, that shut us down on touring, I go, well, we have the opportunity to write 25, 26 songs, narrow it down to the best 14, give it to the record company, and every song that we feel that it stands alone. Unfortunately, the record company said we don't want 14 songs, we only want 10. And I went, you're joking, right? You only want 10? There's four other great songs we've written. But because we're coming out on vinyl and CD, if we would have put 14 songs on the CD and only 10 on the vinyl, we're in competition with ourselves.
Sure.
So they ditched 4 songs off our record. And I wasn't happy about it, I'll be honest with you.
You'd still put them out as like digital bonus tracks, though, I would assume.
I told them, if you don't want to put those songs out within 12 months, give them back to me. My record contract says 10 songs. And if you don't put those bonus tracks out in the next year, I want them back. And we have 4 more songs on the burner. There's 8. We'll write 2 more and we'll have another record.
Nice. Yeah, what inspired you to put out this album? I know you were saying what inspired you to write these songs, but as I said, Broken Bones, it came with a DVD. I have the hard copy. And I remember you saying on there and saying in the press, like, Broken Bones may be the last Dokken album. So what made you rethink that?
I don't know, it was. We haven't put out a record out for 10 years. I just figured that the times have changed. If you put out a record on Monday, it's uploaded to the internet on Napster on Tuesday, and everybody downloads it for free. And I'm like, what's the point of putting the record out? We can't make any money. We can't do anything. Everybody downloads the records for free. And then it got worse with fucking Apple when they said, pay $20 a month and you can download as many songs as you want. It used to be, you had to pay per song 99 cents. And when they decided to say, we're just going to let anybody download as many songs they want, just pay your $24 a month. And I said, well, then the bands are getting screwed. We don't get paid. We're not going to get any money. So what's the point of making another record? And at that point, we had so many hits. I said, well, we'll just tour, guys. We'll just go on tour, play the hits, and that's the end of it. But I finally got a bug and I said, man, I've got so many songs in my head and on tape and on our hard drives. There's so many songs I'd like to record and put out. And my inspiration was we'd be on tour, like let's say the Dokken Festival 4 years ago. There's 50,000 people, and I see 24-year-olds, 20-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds, and they're all singing the lyrics. And I'm like, holy shit. And I would meet some of these fans after the show. And I said, no offense, kid, but you're 24. You weren't born when we did these records. And they tell me that their parents had passed down their record collection to them, but they were too young to see Dokken when they were 12, 13, and 14. So now it's like they've discovered us 20 years later. So I thought, well, let's make a record and let's turn all these fans on to new Dokken music.
And the response has been great. I mean, just the view count on these videos on YouTube is tremendous. You know what I wanted to ask you about? I've seen this in a bunch of interviews that you've done, and you've been very open about this, that the voice of Don Dokken, you kind of said earlier, in the 80s is not going to be the same voice as Dokken in 2023. What I was wondering is, when you perform, do you kick yourself for the fact that like every classic Dokken song from the early years has these incredible high notes that, I mean, it's just not possible to hit at this age? Do you think
Yep.
like I should have probably had some songs that where I wasn't doing these gymnastics?
Yeah, I mean, I was always trying to keep up with Ryan James Dio, Robert Halford, all these guys, the Glenn Hugheses, and all these could hit these B flats above A, these soprano notes. And I did it in the 80s. But it's kind of like, your voice is like an engine in a car. You build it, it's fresh. I'm young. You race the Indy 500 and you win. And the next year, you use the same engine and you come in third. And use the same engine the next year and it comes in sixth. Your vocal cords have miles on them. And if I would have known I needed to maintain this alto, place I used to sing and these crazy high notes, I would have sang lower. And I've heard a million singers that I know say, if we would have known, we wouldn't have sang so high, and now it's changed. But then you look at the grunge bands in the 90s, they all sang very low.
Sure.
They sang low, not high. They almost sang in spoken word.
Probably other than Chris Cornell. Chris Cornell had some crazy high notes.
He still had it, and I just think it's a crying shame that he was so talented and doing movie soundtracks and all this stuff. Why he would commit suicide after doing his first show in Detroit, it boggles my mind. If you look at all the grunge singers from Lane to Chris to everybody, they're all dead.
Yeah.
I don't understand this whole hang yourself overdose. I don't get it. You look at all the grunge bands that were huge in the 90s, all the singers are dead.
Yeah, other than, of course, Smashing Pumpkins, who's still out there doing
Right.
it.
And Pearl Jam.
Yeah, Pearl Jam as well. Yeah, it is a shame.
Pearl Jam didn't sing high.
No, very
Smashing
true.
Pumpkins didn't sing high. Chris Cornell was one of my favorite singers. I mean, God, he had some just amazing vocals, and he had a great sound. And when I saw that video where he played Detroit, his hometown, and said, "I'll see you on tour," and yada, he's got a wife and kids. He goes back to his hotel room and hangs himself. I don't relate.
Yeah.
Life is short, man. And, God, we're not born with a certificate that says, you have now been born and we promise you'll have a wonderful life. It doesn't work that way, man. You got to fight for success. You got to fight for what you want to do. You got to fight to be a musician. You got to fight to keep going. But a lot of these guys just get depression. It's genetic. And they commit suicide. It broke my heart when Chris did that. And Lane and Alice in Chains and all those other bands. I just didn't get it.
Yeah.
I have depression. I'm bipolar. I'm up, I'm down. Some days I want to write a rock song, up tempo, kicking ass, just rocking. That's the mood I'm in. Then the next day, I'm feeling mopey. and I might write a song like Heaven Sent. It just depends on whatever the universe gives me. But I would never kill myself. I've got children and I've got my family, and I just don't relate to that. But, that's another story.
Yeah.
But, this album, oh, it's a bummer. You haven't heard the record. For me, this new record is very up-tempo, all positive lyrics. I'm not writing about love found, love lost. I'm writing about a lot of different songs. Every song is like a story, like the new video, Gypsy. It's animated. I don't know if you've
Yes,
seen
and
it.
they did a great job on that.
Yeah, that was fun. A girl drew that from Poland. Natalia, she drew it on her iPad, that cartoon. I was like, wow. And now we're working on Is It Me or Is It You? And our next video, which is all AI, all artificially generated graphics. But I plan on doing a video for every song on the record.
And which is incredible too, because this isn't just you in front of a blue screen. Every video has been something of the two. Like I said, I've only seen two because that's all that's been released so far. But every video stands out of those two as something individual. The story is different, and the imagery is very different. So I'm as I said, blown away by both of the new songs.
It would have been very easy for me to get the band, go rent a stage, put up some lights, put up our equipment, 4 cameras, shoot the video like we did on It's Another Day under the Dokken reunion, and just film it and edit it and put it out there. I didn't want to do that, So luckily I live in Santa Fe, and there's a venue here for artists called Meow Wolf, and I wanted to film there because they have all these weird, look at the video. It's some weird, every scene's different. It's like weird, psychedelic. And I said, let's go do something different. And so we did. We just did Fugitive. And the record company said, that'll cost a fortune. And I said, well, it's my money. I can do what I want. So we did it. And in the end, the result is we've had over 500,000 views in 6 weeks.
Within a pretty short time span.
So you see all these videos coming out of 80s bands, 90s bands, and they have a $10,000 budget, and they just put out a video. And you see their hits, 10,000, 20,000. And I thought, well, we got to do, after 10 years, we need to do something really amazing, And the video came out, and now it's over 550,000 views in 6 weeks. So I think I proved my point.
Oh, absolutely. And the other thing that you're proving too, I mean, we're talking about the voice thing. When you go out and you see Dokken, you are seeing Don Dokken up there singing. You're seeing the whole band playing. And as I know you're saying like you don't want to be up on blabbermouth for things, but there are a whole lot of other bands from the Dokken era still going out performing, and they are playing to tape. They're not performing live. So yeah, I mean, you could sound like 1984 Don Dokken if you played to a tape, and I could tell it's something you refuse to do and refuse to compromise your integrity as an artist.
Never. Funny, earlier I was online. I don't go to YouTube very often. And I was actually looking at some video about the Three Stooges, what happened to them and stuff. And I saw these videos about this guy's doing background vocals. He's lip syncing. Motley Crue has background vocals. Blackie Lawless is not singing any vocals. Well, whatever. I don't use background vocals. I don't have tape because I can't sing that high. I just sing the best I can. But, I'll see fans like 3 weeks ago, we had like 7,000 people in Massachusetts. And I can see people in the front. And when I go to hit the kiss of death and that super high note, and I don't do it, and the fans do this with their finger, like, come on, man, go for the note. And I'm like, guys, I mean, I'm 70. Let it go. I sing the best I can, but we'll never use tape and never use background vocals. If it comes to that, then we'll stop touring.
Yeah.
I sing fine. But what I did on this new album, I sang in my comfort range.
Sure.
Which
I think feels the same with Broken Bones. Broken Bones was like that as well.
Yeah, it's in the comfort range. I just realized I don't have nothing to prove. You know, I
Yeah.
sang the high notes in the 80s and I did 3,000 concerts, in my 80s heyday. I can hit those notes still. I can hit them, but if I hit them, then the next day I'm pretty beat up. So
Yeah, I
I
mean, look
have,
what just happened to Steven Tyler. They had to cancel all the remaining Aerosmith dates for the rest of
yep,
the year.
yep. Stephen, Aerosmith's farewell tour, they just canceled the whole thing.
They
You know,
postponed it. I'm hoping they didn't
oh,
cancel
I'm
it.
sorry. No, they postponed it.
Yeah, yeah.
I feel bad that, Joey Kramer, the original drummer, is not going to be in the band anymore. He's an original member. I don't know the politics behind that, but it's not my business. But, Steven, I guess maybe he had vocal problems. I don't know. I just will concentrate on Dokken. Steven Tyler canceled the tour or the band canceled the tour. They'll be back. Maybe he just needs to rest.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, he's
Hopefully. I mean, because they're still doing it live. They're still great. So one thing I wanted to ask you about, as we're wrapping things up here is you see the American flag behind me. I do this show usually with Chris Peranto, former Army Ranger. I got to meet him at the time while I was working at Sirius XM. So we do have our audience, I would say, is about 50% military or law enforcement, about 50% civilians like
good.
myself and
You
yourself.
should be supporting
So
them.
absolutely. So I was wondering from your perspective, man, have any guys ever deployed and said to you like, man, I was listening to Lightning Strikes Again or something when I was out there doing my job? Or do you have any stories of military guys meeting you who you helped them get the job done with your music?
I have many, many pictures that were sent to me in the late 80s, early 90s of people deployed to Afghanistan, which is a sad war. People don't realize it was our longest war ever. We were in Afghanistan for 20 years, 20 years fighting the Taliban. Okay, we killed one guy, Osama bin Laden, and then we pull out. And within, what was it, 3 months, the Taliban took over the whole country.
Yeah.
So 20 years of Americans getting killed, 20 years of being there, billions of dollars is spent, and within months,
Did I just lose you, Don?
oh,
So if Harold, our video editor, might edit that together, we were singing "Lightning Strikes Again" together a little bit as the power went out, and I wasn't sure if you were thinking now I'm giving my opinions on Afghanistan, and suddenly the interview disconnects, which was not the case. So as we left off there, you were saying, yeah, 20-year war. There's got all these guys died, and what for was basically the point you were
for
making.
not. It was for not. Afghanistan, we had, World War I, World War II, 4 years, Vietnam, 6 years, Afghanistan, 20 years, because obviously after the World Trade Center got hit and we're looking for one guy. And I always said they'll catch him eventually, but Osama bin Laden's not gonna stop the psycho mentality of the Taliban. I was just watching the news the other day, and they passed a new law that if women don't wear their burqas properly, that little thing, or hijab on their head, their hijab on their head properly, they can be arrested and put in prison for 10 years if they don't have their hijab on properly. I mean, they're a pretty whacked out, fanatical Muslim society that took over. It just reminds us that we live in America. We can wear what we want. And if a girl wants to wear a mini skirt and 6-inch heels and a bustier with her boobs popping out, that's her right. But, we all know about the woman that was killed. They arrested her, took her to jail, and they killed her. She was 22 years old. And she had her job on, but they said it wasn't put on properly. Wasn't positioned right. They killed her. I mean, this is shit that's going on in the world that's just wrong, and it just blows my mind that a woman, until a couple of years ago, for the Taliban took over, women could go to college, get a medical degree, be a doctor, a lawyer, whatever. And now they've changed the laws that the women have to stay in the house and stay behind closed doors and don't look out. And it's all, the women have to stay in the house. I mean, Jesus Christ, man. It's the year 2023. Really? So it's sad that we spent 20 years and billions of dollars to make their country free. And within, what was it, 8 weeks, the Taliban just came in and took over.
Yeah,
You know,
and that's been
so
the same response I've gotten from plenty of special operations guys who fought there who have been on the podcast. They have the same feeling about it as you. And actually, this is why songs that you've written like Will the Sunrise are
right.
still relevant today.
I mean, in the 80s, like 88, 9, 91, when I had some downtime, I used to go on these tours and I would go to all the military bases and play like acoustic shows with a couple of my friends to play for all the wounded veterans that were coming back from these various wars. And they had arms missing and legs missing. And, and we'd talk and I'd ask them about what was it like and what happened. And they got PTSD. And I met a lot of these soldiers, and they must be really pissed off that they fought for our country and fought for democracy. And at the end of the day, we pulled out and let the Taliban come in and just take over the country. They wasted their limbs and their lives, and it sucks. I'm not very political, but it just sucks. And I've gone to many, many military bases. It was kind of cool because they showed me the Bradleys and the tanks. I got to go inside the tank and see all the stuff and go in a Bradley, and they show me how things worked. And that was cool. I got tons of pictures of me sitting with wounded veterans on their armored vehicles. And they tell me about, we don't understand why the government didn't put armored plating on the Bradleys. So if they hit an IED, it's all armored on the sides, but the bomb would just come up to the floor and blow their legs off. And one guy I remember told me, he said, yeah, when I'm going down a road, I used to put my helmet and sit on it because I knew if I hit an IUD, it's going to blow my ass off. It was a bad design. Bottom line, it's a bad design.
Yeah, I echo a lot of the sentiments you're saying here. I mean, I get to work with a lot of military guys like yourself. I'm a civilian. The interesting thing about doing this podcast is I do get to hear perspectives from people on all ends of where they stand on these wars we've been in and that type of thing. And I guess I will say some of the positives that even someone like myself didn't think about. We had a guy on the show named Hamidi Jassim, who is an Iraqi. And before America came into there, he was put into Saddam's prison at the age of, I believe, like 12 or 14, tortured, and went on to fight with the Americans. So there are people who have positive things to say. At the same point, I mean, it's fair to say, and I know you would agree on this, I mean, we did not find weapons of mass destruction. It was definitely built on a lot of things that people would agree were a lie that we went in there for.
That was a
But
lie. That was a huge
yeah,
lie. They were
sure.
digging the streets looking for, weapons of mass destruction in military. That was the president at the time because he was trying to justify the billions of dollars and the troops that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. He didn't have shit,
Yeah.
They never found anything. It was just a way for him because these generals want to go out and play war. What did they find? Nothing. They found nothing. It was all bullshit. And that's just the way it is. And why would you build the Bradley with all this armor plating, but the bottom of the vehicle has got a 16th of an inch of metal? So if you hit an IUD, you're going to get blown up.
Yeah.
I mean, who came up with that? I remember talking to somebody and he said, we used to take our Bradleys and go back to the base and we'd grab pieces of steel, 1/2 inch, and weld it underneath the vehicle, protect ourselves. I mean, what the hell? The government, it is what it was, is, you know?
Yeah, yeah, no, I would fully agree. Well, I know that the with the way that the weather is out there, we might disconnect at any second.
Yeah.
So I'd like to wrap this up. It's been an honor speaking with you, though, as such a longtime fan, getting to hear you touch on such a variety of issues. Of course, once again, Heaven Comes Down, October 27th,
Yep.
Dokken.net, at Dokken on X or Twitter, at Dokken_official on Instagram. Anything else you want to get out there? I'm very excited for the new album. You know, I know you're going to hit the road in support of this album.
Yep.
Anything that you want your fans or fans of this podcast to know before we wrap it up?
My fans that have been Dokken fans for 40 years, I will tell them it's not just another Dokken record. It's probably the finest record we've done since Back the Attack. Every song is killer. It sounds good. It's got great lyrics and vocals, and John Levin played some amazing solos on the record. And anybody buys a record and doesn't like it, email me to the website and I'll give them their money back.
That's
I mean, that's how much I believe in that record.
that's well said, man. That shows that you stand behind what you're putting out there.
Absolutely. We don't need to get any more politics. And it's just, as an American, I've had the chance of a lot of Americans that haven't gone to military bases. I've been all over the world. I've been to India. I've been to Pakistan. I've been to Afghanistan. I've been there. And I saw what was going on. And I get angry, you know, because you've got a bunch of 80-year-old men in Congress and the Senate, you know, making decisions, sending young people to fight a war that could be won. And now we got the Ukraine and the Russians. And I'm like, son of a bitch. If the Ukraine loses, you know, Putin, he's a mass murderer. He'll just keep going into Poland, into Germany. There's a reason why the Ukraine are fighting like tooth and nail to, excuse the pun,
Yeah, tooth and nail.
to protect their country. You know, there's a lot of millions of people that love Trump, millions of people love the other side. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. But when we have an ex-president that says he's having a bromance with Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un, these are two guys that are mass murderers. And when we had a president that's trying to be their friends, it's very upsetting. And I've already said in many interviews, you know, if things get worse, I'm moving to France.
Yeah, I've heard you express that before. So
I'm serious.
well, yeah, we'll see if that's the case. But man, as once again, longtime fan, really appreciate you coming on, especially through this weather that's been on and off, kind of crazy here. But
Yeah, I
thank you so
apologize
much,
for
Don.
that, you know, with the thunder and lightning. What I will say in closing, that I'm just a musician. I can only make music, and I've always believed, can you imagine the world without music? It would be a very boring world. Doesn't matter what band. Can you imagine us not having any music? I'm just putting out music to make people happy, to give them an escape from their everyday life. And you work all day 9 to 5, and you come home and you got this and that, and you want to put on a Dokken record or a Motley Crue or a Motorhead album. It's an escape, and that's what music's all about, to escape. And now with Dokken, after 40 years, there's a lot of nostalgia involved. You know, I have so many people that say, I've heard this saying many, many, many times on tour. You were the soundtrack of my youth. That's what they say. Dokken was the soundtrack of my youth, and that always makes me feel good. And we come to your concerts still because it brings back the memories of high school and college. And when I got married, I danced to Alone Again. And when I got divorced, I played this song, and that makes me feel good. You know, as long as our music gives people some relief and some happiness, that's all that matters when it comes to being a musician.
Yes, strangely enough, Dokken is also part of the soundtrack to my high school years, but not at that time because, as I said, I'm 37. But I remember with my friend watching the Nightmare on Elm Street DVD box set and seeing that Dream Warriors video in there. So believe it or not, it brings me back to that time as well. And it's still something I constantly listen to.
Yeah, it brings you back to that moment in time, and we had a blast. I just did an interview last year with Robert Englund, who played Freddy, and he's doing great. He's on Broadway, and he has a house here in Santa Fe. So we talked about that, but it was for me the same thing. I think about Nightmare on Elm Street, how fun it was making the video, and In My Dreams, and all those videos, going down Sunset Boulevard on a semi truck, and the cops kept pulling us over every 10 minutes because we were playing too loud, and we ended up with a rainbow. They're all fond memories, but I still believe I can't imagine the world without music, be it whatever band you like.
That's all for this episode of Battle Line Podcast, but we're always posting new content on social media. Follow us on Instagram at Battle Line Podcast and on Twitter at Battle Line Pod. That's an order. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes up every Tuesday. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or your podcast platform of choice. Believe in yourself. Face all challenges head on. And as always, never quit.